Welcome back. I hope that you had an enjoyable evening and all rested and prepared to get started today. First of all, I just want to thank you all for your attention and your engagement yesterday. I know that it couldn't have been easy to sit there all day and do all that listening and not a lot of moving around. So we really appreciated your attention. Even though all the presenters have really interesting things to say, but it can be difficult to just sit there and take all that information in over the course of the day. So thank you for that. And the reason why we had structured the summit in this manner was so that we could ensure that everybody had access to the same information going into today's discussions. And so today is what's really the exciting part of the summit. I think for us is we're really thrilled to be able to have this opportunity to have a conversation with all of you and to learn from all of your experience and be able to collect that in a manner that will help us be more informed as we move forward. And I just wanted to say that thank you again to all of the presenters from yesterday. And although we heard some of the challenges yesterday, and this is important that we do that. It's important that we do discuss some of those challenges that exist so that we can look at how we change them or fix them. But we also have to be, I think, conscious of the tremendous opportunities and strengths that we have here in Alberta. And I think we talked about that as well yesterday. And Alberta is the destination of choice for newcomers in Canada. We talked about that on a number of occasions. And this is not only because of what we hear a lot about it with the availability of jobs, right? But it's also about because of all of the hard work that we've all done here to create the conditions for success for newcomers, for settlement and integration success. And I think that's something we can all be proud of. I know that feel really privileged in my work to be able to work with such a strong, professional, specialized settlement sector in our province, and I think I think we're in an enviable position there because I think in our province we are really lucky to have that strong sector, and a strong sector that works so collaboratively with all of the orders of government that we had talked about yesterday, as well as all of the other actors in this room and beyond that make up the settlement system. But anyway, I know that we're eager to start today's discussion, so I won't really speak much longer. I just wanted to say that many of you, I think several of you, but not all, but I think most of you, have completed a survey when you first registered for the summit. And this survey was the first step in helping us to identify some priorities for our discussions today. So before we get started in having those discussions, I'm going to welcome Anna up here to share with us some of the results from that survey. There were some interesting findings for sure. Then after Anna is done, John will come up and briefly talk about the 4 pillars that will frame our discussions for today. And then finally, I get to come back up and task you with the work that we're going to do. So, Anna?
So this survey, just for your information, was put together by the advisory board. And we really wanted to have questions that reflect the complex nature of the field. So I am going to just talk about the priorities that we were asked to identify. So as we break into groups, we have a sense of what these priorities are. So question number 5 on the survey asks you to prioritize the top 4 programming priorities for the labor market programming. And if just to remember, 1 is better than 4. That is, the closer to the text on the left-hand side, the better it is, the more higher priority there is. So according to this, the first priority identified by you is foreign qualifications recognition. 53% of you said that this is their top priority. The second is overseas information and orientation. 46.5% of you said that that is the priority. Priority number 3 is labor market information. And priority number 4 is employment engagement. So that's for the group that we will talk about. Labor market, these are the priorities that you collectively identified. The second slide, and question number 6, asks you to prioritize language training and delivery. And so the first one, as you can see here on this chart, is graph rather, is language assessment. 58% of you said language assessment is their first priority. The second, 45, almost 45%, identified as bridging program that combine language training and work placement. This is the second priority. The third is formal classroom-based language training. 30% of you identified that as a priority. And not surprising, but somewhat surprising, was priority number 4, that is support services for language training. It does not have immediate language training component, but supporting those who attend these language programs. And that is child minding and transportation and things that we all know. Question number 7 asks you to prioritize in core settlement services. Number 1 is information and orientation. 44% of you prioritize that as number 1. Number 2 is need assessment and referrals. Number 3, settlement counseling. 23% of you said that that's number 3 priority. And number 4, 21.2% of you indicated that ethnocultural community collaboration with settlement agencies is a priority. And the last question that speaks to the priorities that you identified has to do with welcoming communities. And number 1 on this 36.2% identified labor market connections as their first priority. Number 2 priority with 31.7% is engaging wider cross-section of society in settlement and integration. And number 3 is neighborhood connections with almost 30%. And number 4 is engaging broader range of government departments and settlement and in settlement and integration, not just those that have their responsibility, primary responsibility, immigration and settlement. So I hope that this provides you an overview of what you collectively identified as priorities. And when you break into groups, you will elaborate on these priorities and have a plan how to move forward. So thank you very much.
So as we mentioned yesterday, today we're going to invite you, courtesy of my colleagues, to come to the dark side a little bit with us. And really we're not talking about looking at priorities in the exclusion of other areas. It's a question of emphasis and of impact we're going to have for our clients. It's really a message we need to put out there. It's not a simple either or. It's where do we put the emphasis? Where do we know that we need to build on the success and the strengths that we do have in our system in Alberta, particularly as we look at the changes that are coming, both in the scale of the number of newcomers who are coming to Alberta and where they are arriving. So, not to sound like a broken record, but I'm sure by now all of you have been to the AAISA website and you've absorbed all of the hundreds of pages of documentation that is there. But one of the absolutely core pieces is the one that's titled Thematic Backgrounder, that talks about the 4 broad areas that we're going to invest in our time and energy today. And the purpose of that document was when we as an organizing committee were putting together the summit, what we did not want to do was have all of the language folks meet only with language folks, and all of those who do labor market only meet with labor market, and all of those interested in LIPs and libraries and mainstream institutions and community engagement talk with one another, and all of the Francophone organizations talking to only each other. What we really wanted to underscore and emphasize was in the settlement system of today and tomorrow, all of these pieces fit together and have to work together if we're going to be successful. And so if you're wondering why it is you're an expert in language, you're being asked to participate in sessions on labor market, welcoming communities, and core settlement services, that's why. We want you to help us make those connections so that all of us more fully understand how the system fits together and where we can have the maximum impact. But we recognize that not everybody is equally comfortable in all 4 of the thematic areas. So we just wanted to take a couple of minutes to sketch for you what we think of as the types of programming that we see in each of those thematic areas. So you can think about how does the work that you do and the needs that you and the clients that you work with every day interact with that particular area. So if you don't have this document in front of you, or you haven't got a memory so that you can recall it perfectly, I'm just going to spend a few minutes on each one to sketch out what fits into each area. So starting with theme 1, which is the welcoming communities and social connections area, which we're going to focus on first this morning with the very first working groups. There are 2 broad areas that we conceptualize in this area. There's the community connections component, which is the direct services that connect clients to a wide swath of institutions in our communities. And there's the community engagement component, which is trying to work with those broader sectors within our communities that are not necessarily fully cognizant of the work that we do in settlement and the need for them to be more accepting and inclusive of newcomers in their community. We also sketched in the document, just by way of kind of an exercise to illustrate what kinds of priorities are we looking for. We put down at the bottom of the page on each of the 4 thematic areas what the priorities were in our last national call for proposals. Not because it's definitive, not because we think those are the best priorities, but we wanted to illustrate from a funder's perspective, how does the conversation we have today translate into a priority that helps us guide our funding decisions across a system. Oops, sorry. In thematic area 2, what we've called core settlement services, we agonized over this as a committee for some time of how we really capture the guts and the meat of what happens in a settlement agency, which doesn't fall easily into the areas of language, labor market, or engaging the broader community. And there are 4 areas that we found that we wanted to illustrate here, and you saw them on the slides that Anna just gave you. So information and orientation, needs assessments and referrals, support services, so newcomers that have preschool-aged children that require childminding in order to attend classes, assessments, and other services, transportation, interpretation, crisis counseling, and provisions for persons with disabilities all fit into that broad gamut, and I'm sure there are a wider range of support services that each of you can think of. And then sector support. One of the areas that I think often gets overlooked is if we're going to design an effective system, having the right sector support and the right infrastructure so that we can connect with one another and make the most of the resources that we have is absolutely critical. Theme 3, I often think of this as one of the most self-explanatory, but that's because I'm immersed in it every day, is language training. As my colleagues who do language training like to remind us, language training is more than learning about the language. An awful lot of settlement happens in each of those language classes. And so we think of this from the assessment portion of it all the way through the design of curriculum, professional development, delivery in a classroom, delivery in different contexts, the opportunity to practice the language skills, and measuring output, or not output, outcomes at the end of the day. Does it actually result in the real world skills that those newcomers need for their desired outcomes? And the 4th area, labor market programming. When this connects with settlement, it connects in a particularly complex manner because there are so many different actors in labor market programming. Where does settlement stop and labor market programming for the entire population pick up and begin? So typically when we think of settlement and labor market, we think of employment-related services. We don't think of direct matching between an employer and a potential employee because there are so many different services that are already in place. We think of employment bridging, mentoring, networking, credential assessment preparation, counseling, skills development, and training. So all kind of pre-labor market components which are going to make our clients and our colleagues more successful when they go out looking for the job that's optimal in their past. And then that interfaces with what is frequently a provincially funded system that picks up the broader labor market issues. So finding the right balance of how we connect our clients and what is clearly one of the core areas of need and an outcome we're all striving for, with that broader system without replicating elements of the system, is one of the things we need to most come to ground with. Marc, I'll leave directly for you.
Okay. So thank you, Anna, for the insight into the survey results, and John for the overview of the 4 thematic areas that we're going to be looking at today. So as we talked about yesterday, on the back of your name tags, there should be a working group number and the room location. And the room maps are actually in your agenda booklet. So if you're unsure of where you're going or how to find your room, you can find it in the maps. Okay, so when you go to your working group, what you'll do is there will be 5 questions that you'll be asked as a group to discuss. And those questions are also in your agenda here, but you'll be looking at things like the current situation, what are the gaps in services, are there issues identified for any specific groups, what makes the issues different in your community, and then also identifying specific strategic directions that need further exploration. And those questions, of course, will be in the rooms as well. You'll have the help of a facilitator who will guide you through the process to make sure that you keep the discussion moving, as well as a note taker for your table to capture all of what you're saying, because we don't want to lose anything. So those supports will be in each of the rooms. A couple of things. So when you'll notice in your agenda here, you'll have your discussion, then you'll have a break, you'll move to your next topic. A couple of things. One is very important, because people get very territorial around their caffeine. Coffee for your breaks is actually still down here in these rooms. If you notice coffee around your room, upstairs or wherever, it's probably belonging to another meeting. So to avoid any problems or hurt, please don't take their coffee. Come down and let's use our own coffee today. Also, if you're interested in the discussion around express entry that's happening during lunch, that's going to be taking place in this room. So if you're not interested and you want to have conversations over lunch, the other room will still be available, but the discussion around express entry presentation will happen in this room. Part of the presentation will be delivered in French, so if you need to, the headphones, the headsets are in the back of the room. Yes, just the last thing, at the end of the day, we will be having a brief wrap-up here back in this larger room, and we will be ending on time. There is a 6-year-old girl dressed as a giraffe in Calgary that is needing her father home, so we need to get him on his way. So we'll make sure that we meet back here right on time, and we'll finish for the day. So thank you very much. I'll send you forth, and I look forward to hearing your discussions.